It was the sort of blunder that doesn't just cost a badge, it topples dynasties. On a spotless cul-de-sac, a highly decorated cop in his late 40s, Dan Rourke, swung a driver like an executioner's blade. His target, the new black neighbor next door, Malik Jordan, early 40s, moving with quiet, effortless confidence in a black silk button-up traced with white blossoms, pricey, tailored, unforgivable in Rourke's mind. He thought he'd enforce respect. Instead, he cracked thunder over a phantom, a man shaped by clandestine programs that unmake regimes. Rourke wasn't asserting order. He was summoning consequences. Rourke believed he was giving a civics lesson. In truth, he struck at a mirage, a professional problem solver trained to dismantle threats, more complicated than an angry suburban officer with a fragile crown. He wasn't humiliating Malik. He activated an equal and opposite reaction. Before we step into this spiral of authority, prejudice, and payback, drop where you're watching from and hit subscribe. You will not want to miss what detonates after this. Saturday sun lacquered the lawns of Sterling Point. Dan nursed stale coffee and older resentments, watching the moving truck disappear like a departing alibi. The house, two-story colonial with dormers, had long felt to Rourke like it belonged to someone like him. Now it belonged to Malik Jordan. As Malik stepped onto his porch in that immaculate silk shirt, he moved with a measured, economical grace that sanded Rourke's nerves raw. No swagger, no noise, just presence. Malik collected a piece of misdirected mail, scanning the quiet street with a composed, appraising glance. It was the look of a man already rooted. That unbothered ease grated like grit in a bearing. Rourke felt trespassed upon by a man merely existing beside him. "Hey!" Rourke called, voice sawing through the suburban calm. "You!" Malik turned, unreadable, offering the smallest nod. Equal to equal. First offense in Rourke's unwritten code. "I'm talking to you," Dan pressed, stepping down from his porch, shoes whispering over lawn he trims like a shrine. He wore weekend clothes, but his profession radiated like a toxic halo. "You knew, just moved in?" Malik's baritone came steady, unafraid. "Looks that way." Rourke's gaze crawled Malik's shirt, counting dollars. "People here have a way of doing things. We show respect. We know who's in charge." Malik's fingers pinched slightly on the envelope, his only visible reaction. "Sounds like a nice neighborhood," he said, turning toward his door. Second offense, turning his back. "We're not done," Rourke barked, leaving his mug sweating on the rail. He crossed the property line without hesitation, grass crisp underfoot, the trespass deliberate. "Don't see papers on you. Got ID? Proof you belong?" Malik pivoted, mask of composure intact. "I'm not required to show you anything. This is my property." The plainness of that truth poured gasoline on embers Rourke had tended for years. "Your property," Dan scoffed, an ugly, gravelly laugh. He jabbed a thick finger toward Malik's chest. "This is my town, my streets, and on my streets, you respect law enforcement." Malik's reply stayed level. "You're not in uniform. You're on my lawn. I'm asking you to leave." The third and final offense. Something brittle snapped. Years of simmering bias, occupational arrogance, small tyrannies run like drills, coalescing into one clean, vicious impulse. His eye flicked to the golf bag by the garage. Brand new driver. Father's Day flex. Titanium head catching sunlight like a dare. Without a word, Rourke turned, paced to his side of the line, and wrapped his hands around the leather grip. A surge of reckless clarity rushed him. Better than a baton because it felt personal. Malik didn't flinch or beg. He simply watched, reading distance, hip set, shoulders quiet, noting intent in Dan's eyes, and the weight shift that foretold angle and speed. "Last chance," Rourke growled, voice thick with long-stored rage. "Learn your place." Malik answered with silence, stance braced. The driver whistled, a full, unrestrained arc powered by years of entitlement. Titanium met skull with a sickening, hollow report that seemed to echo off brick and sky and manicured hedges. Malik's world detonated in hot white bloom, then tunneled. Grass, clouds, red brick. Everything slid, smeared by pain. He staggered. Knees buckled. Training refused collapse. He dropped to one knee, hand clamping the wound, feeling skin split and warmth slicking hair. Through the symphonic ringing, he heard Rourke's triumphant spit. See? That's what happens when you forget respect. Somewhere inside the noise, Malik began to catalog. Threads of the tapestry were already visible. 2 more cops pulled to the curb, Sutter and Bell, arriving early for Rourke's barbecue. They saw their friend panting, club in hand, a black man on one knee with blood painting a silk shirt. Reflexes forged by years of mutual cover clicked into place. They didn't clock a felony. They clocked a problem to be authored. The blue wall rose like a curtain. Sutter slid from the cruiser first, palm resting on his holster. Bell fanned left, eyes raking the scene. Club, blood, lawns, windows, whispering with curious curtains. Dan, what the hell? Sutter asked, low, aligned. He came at me. Rourke grunted, lying with the ease of someone who rehearses. He let the driver drop and clatter, prop dressing for his martyrdom. New guy got aggressive. Threatened me. I defended myself. Bell moved toward Malik, boot nudging Malik's extended leg. On your stomach, hands behind you. Now. Malik's vision wobbled. The floor tilted like a deck. Pressure pulsed behind his eyes, a concussion signature. But his mind cut through fog. Cold, efficient. He had seen this choreography on 4 continents. Aggressor cast as victim. System shields itself. Everyone knows their line. He reached for something, Rourke added, the fiction evolving in real time. In his pocket. Thought it was a weapon. Sutter knelt, movements clipped and practiced. He yanked Malik's arms back. White pain spiked in Malik's skull, then cuffed him, steel biting. What's in your pocket, friend? Sutter asked, fishing. He pulled a wallet, a phone. No weapon, Bell muttered, scanning the lawn. His eyes found a stray silver box cutter near the azaleas, left by movers harmless as lint. Suddenly, it became the smoking gun. Bell tapped it into a bag with a pin, sanctifying debris. Neighbors peeking through blinds registered the tableau's edited version. 2 officers rescuing a colleague from an armed intruder. Perception hardened, and the lie began to calcify in public memory. Get him up, Sutter said. They hauled Malik to shaky feet. The world lurched and blurred. The wound throbbed like a red-hot rivet. They steered him toward the cruiser, that silk shirt now spattered with his own blood. Disorderly. Assault on an officer. Resisting, Sutter murmured to Bell, charges assembling like a prefab house. The back door slammed, sealing Malik in recycled coffee and conspiracy. Through the cage, Malik watched how they clustered around Rourke, not like civilians to a brawler, but like guild brothers closing ranks. Bell clapped Dan's shoulder. You good? Need a medic? I'm fine, Rourke said, rubbing knuckles as if he'd fought fair. Guy was crazed. And that was that. The lie completed its last lap. As the cruiser eased away, Malik leaned his temple to the cool glass, letting the vibration rattle pain loose. He watched his new house, symbol of a life carved through persistence, recede, small as a postage stamp. He felt the temperature drop inside. He understood with a clarity colder than the ache that this wasn't about one bigoted officer. This was architecture. They had badges, evidence bags, official phrasing. They could invert reality on letterhead. At the station, the ritual ground on. Malik was hauled from the car and marched through intake, bleeding while fluorescent lights hummed discouragement. The desk sergeant, O'Reilly, thick-set and incurious, barely looked up. What's the charge? Assault on LEO. Officer Rourke, Bell said. Box cutter. O'Reilly smirked at Malik's blood and split scalp. Looks like Dan got his licks. The cell swallowed him whole. Steel door, concrete room, sweat and bleach stink. The bunk's metal slab was a dare. He sat, breathing through the drumline in his head, as laughter drifted from outside, Sutter and Bell drafting the myth in triplicate. Each sentence poured more concrete into the wall around him. No neighbor would contradict them. Evidence would hold. It was his word versus 3 decorated uniforms. To anyone watching casually, he was another violent black man who clipped consequences. They assumed he was contained, broken, forgettable. They didn't realize whom they'd bracketed. They had not caged a victim. They'd cornered a specialist. The fluorescent hum needled his skull as he sat on the bunk, counting breath and information. Laughter bled through cinder block. Their report was writing him into a monster. Every tick of the wall clock was a rivet in the cage they thought would hold. Malik cataloged exits, cameras, angles, the rhythm of footsteps, the quirks in protocol. He pictured maps, intake, booking, bullpen, interview rooms, the motor pool behind the fence. Pain braided into clarity. They believed the narrative was welded shut. He knew better. Stories leak, systems creak. Pressure, properly applied, makes doors forget they're locked. A guard swung by with a disdainful glance and a plastic bottle of water that tasted like a mop bucket. Malik sipped anyway, watching how keys hung, which badge opened what, and who laughed too hard at Sutter's easy lies. The cell stank of sweat, old disinfectant, and overcooked coffee. He ran a fingertip along the bed frame, feeling for scratches, counting prior occupants the city pretended not to tally. He replayed the swing, stance, wind-up, impact. Dan Rourke had meant to humiliate. He had, instead, rung the bell that called something far older and colder awake. Boots tapped down the hall, measured, paired. 2 uniforms paused by the door window, peering in like boys at a zoo. He's the one? Yeah, took a cut at Rourke. The second cop's mouth pulled sideways. Doubt stifled to keep his pension quiet. They drifted on. Malik closed his eyes, let the pain throb until it smoothed into a distant engine. He pictured the house he refused to lose, the clean lines, the porch he'd planned to sand next weekend, the quiet he'd promised himself. He'd promised it again. Survival first, then truth. Then the bill would come due. They moved him once, a short chain clinking as Sutter walked him past a bulletin board layered with charity flyers and mandatory training notices. Bell trailed, unspeaking, already composing tomorrow's version when the cameras were off. In booking, a young woman at the keyboard avoided Malik's eyes, her fingers quick and careful. A supervisor's shadow fell across her screen and her posture straightened. Malik counted security domes, clocked blind spots where ceiling seams didn't meet cleanly. He noted an emergency exit half blocked by boxes of paper, fine print violating actual law, irony stacked on irony. They dumped him back in the cell. Minutes stretched until they felt like miles. He cataloged the cot's bolts, the hinge gaps, the timing of rounds. When the door rasped open again, it wasn't Sutter or Bell. A man with silver-threaded hair and expensive aftershave wore authority like a tailored coat, late 50s, posture ironed, gaze cool. "Mr. Jordan," he said, careful like handling porcelain he disliked. "Chief Damon Whitaker." He didn't step in at first, made Malik look up. Everything about him said, "I adjudicate gravity." He smiled without warmth, then crossed the threshold like a claim. "I'm told your morning was eventful," Whitaker said, voice smooth, courtroom ready. Malik's head throbbed, but his words held. "Your officer attacked me with a golf club on my lawn. Then his friends manufactured a weapon and a story." The chief's smile edged thinner. "Our report differs. It notes you were hostile and armed." He lifted a clear bag, the box cutter, now sacralized by ink and plastic. Their account has evidence. Yours, he let it hang. Malik met that chill gaze. Then let's shift frames, he said. My name is Malik Jordan, employee ID Echo 73 Delta 2. I'm a senior field officer with Special Activities, Central Intelligence Agency. My supervisor is Deputy Director Kavanaugh. His number sits in the wallet your people seized. Make the call. You're holding a federal employee on fabricated charges. For the first time, Whitaker's mask twitched. Annoyance, not fear. He took the wallet from a tray, flipped it open, studied the seal, the holographics, the unsmiling photo. Silence folded the hallway. Officers exchanged weight from foot to foot. The chief did not pale. He chuckled softly. Langley royalty in my house, he said. Let me explain how my house works. He stepped closer, letting cologne and certainty fill the small space. That plastic? It's decoration here. We have a simpler constitution. My word, my people, my rhythm. Anyone not sworn to it is a tourist. Malik felt a colder dread than the immediate threat. This wasn't mere rot. It was monarchy. You think your clearance changes rules, Whitaker said, circling slowly. Reverse it. I am the rules. On these blocks, in these courtrooms, outsiders who burn daylight for me don't last. You walked a storm into my foyer. I send storms back in body bags when necessary. You've miscalculated, Chief, Malik said, voice low, dangerous. No, Whitaker murmured, planting himself in front of Malik. If you go, you call. Then the alphabet shows up and my garden gets trampled by suits with flashlights and microphones. For what? Because one of mine got over-enthusiastic teaching manners? Unacceptable. So, we craft the lasting version. Charges stay. Assault on an officer, resisting, possession of a weapon. With your background, prosecutors will recite trained combatant like scripture. Maybe we find narcotics in your very expensive car. Judges I trust will build a very deep hole just for you. He pivoted out, knuckles tapping the bars like a gavel. The lock clicked shut with official finality. Malik sat very still while his pulse wrote Morse code under his skin. The realization settled with a heavy, clinical calm. Whitaker wouldn't permit him to walk out alive. That shifted everything. He inhaled, slow and steady, pinned the pain to a quiet wall, and reassessed the board. Isolation, containment, elimination, classic playbook, local edition. He would need a crack, a courier, a channel. He listened to the building breathe and waited for the seam that always appears. Time turned syrup thick. The lights kept their nasal hum, a metronome built to grind patience into powder. Someone down the row swore. Someone else laughed too loudly. Boots cruised past, paused, moved on. Malik mapped them, set watches by them. He pressed his fingers to the wound. Dried blood flaked like rust. He stayed upright and alert, refusing the posture of prey. The first crack arrived, dressed as routine. A younger officer, pale, jumpy, fumbled with keys outside the door. He smelled like drugstore deodorant and nerves, the name tag shining new. Officer E. Dwyer. Prince and Mug, Dwyer said, voice pitched just above firm. He guided Malik to a stainless counter where an old ink pad waited like a relic. Up close, the kid's hands trembled. Tiny, controlled quakes. He's going to bury you with him, Malik said, barely above a whisper. Dwyer's eyes ticked upward, throat working. What? Whitaker. Rourke. All of it. When the story breaks, and it will, everyone who stood by gets names in the article's third paragraph. That's the paragraph people remember. Dwyer swallowed, glanced down the hallway, then back at Malik's hands. Thumb, Dwyer said, the word carrying more meaning than procedure. Malik pressed his thumb into ink. Dwyer's fingers closed around Malik's briefly, too long for coincidence, small as a secret. Something papery and precise shifted into Malik's palm, then disappeared under curled fingers. Index. They worked through the ritual, producing black swirls on a grid. Dwyer's jaw stayed tight. He avoided Malik's eyes, but stayed close enough to listen. "Thank you, Officer Dwyer," Malik said, giving the words a weight that made the kid flinch. "Return him," someone barked, and the moment snapped. Back in the cell, Malik sat, waiting for footsteps to fade, then opened his hand. The note was folded smaller than a postage stamp, written in quick, crowded letters. "Marina Santos, reporter. Trust her." A lifeline. Step 1. A messenger. Step 2. A phone. They would have to allow one call. Even corrupted kingdoms nod to certain myths. He'd be monitored. Calling the agency would confirm Whitaker's fear and accelerate the plan to vanish him. He needed different ears first, ones that made noise in public. Then his own shadows could move without lighting flares. When the time came, a guard marched him to a wall phone scabbed with scratches and indifferent gum. No personal cell. A printed sign warned about recorded lines like a shrug in block letters. The guard stood 3 paces back, arms crossed. Audible. Malik reran contingencies, then dialed a number he kept forever. Burned hot into memory. It rang once. "Nightingale," a gravel voice answered. No names. "Eagle," Malik said. Old call sign. Old corridor. Compromised. Northwood Police Department, Sterling Point. Hostile local command. Full containment. Need quiet extraction and systems recon on the municipal grid. Priority, silent. A beat. Copy. Are you mission critical? Negative, personal matter. Opposition is entrenched and accelerating. Another breath. Understood. Maintain low profile. We spool up under radar. Stay dark, Eagle. The line died. To the guard, it sounded like wrong number, old debt, something forgettable. Malik immediately dialed the number on the note. "Santos," a woman snapped. Quick, professional. "This is Malik Jordan," he said. "Officer Dwyer put me on to you. I'm in custody at Northwood. They're fabricating. It's larger than one club swing." Keys clinked behind him. Paper shuffled. The guard pretended boredom. "I'm looking at a blotter that says you attacked an officer," Santos said, skepticism edged with curiosity. "The officer attacked me," Malik corrected. "And Chief Whitaker is running a closed-loop machine. I can't say more on this line, they monitor." A silence stretched while her newsroom brain spun models. She'd chased rumors around Northwood for years and hit smoke. This smelled different. "My investigator, Ben Carver, will arrive as your attorney in 20. Tell him everything you can inside attorney-client privilege. I'll move the rest in daylight." "Ms. Santos," Malik said, "be careful." "Always," she replied, hanging up. The guard smirked as he led Malik back. "Make your little podcast, tough guy." Malik let it pass, studying again the edges that didn't align. A camera with a faint dead pixel near booking. A fire extinguisher bracket missing a screw. The emergency exit still boxed in. He timed the walk, counted his pace length against tile seams. Back in the cell, he stretched his shoulders and let the world narrow to what he could control. Breath, awareness, the insistence that he would walk through his own front door again. Outside, the precinct's rhythm ticked toward collision. Minutes later, the steel grated open. Sutter stood there with a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Your lawyer's here," he said. The last word dipped in disdain. Malik rose carefully, ignoring the throb, and followed. They threaded past desks, a whiteboard of patrol routes and a corkboard with commendations under glass. Carver waited in interview 2, wearing an off-the-rack suit that fit like a decision, cheap enough to be overlooked, square enough to be trusted. His eyes were cop-sharp, reporter mean. "I'm Ben," he said, tone dry. Sutter scowled. "You got 30. The door shut. "Ms. Santos sends regards," Carver said, opening a thin legal pad he wouldn't need. Up close, Malik read the man. Former something. MP, PI, or a reporter who liked dirty boots. Everything is attorney-client privileged the second I sit, Carver added, for the mic in the ceiling. Malik outlined the morning in clipped phrases: the porch, the swing, the planted cutter, the cuffs, Whitaker's sermon about sovereignty. Carver's pen moved, but his eyes kept count of the camera's lens. Okay, Carver murmured. We'll pry this open from two sides, paper and pavement. And your head? Functional, Malik said. Carver slid his pad a fraction, covering his mouth with his knuckles. Nightingale in motion? He whispered, mouthing more than speaking. Malik's gaze didn't flicker. A microscopic nod. Carver nodded back. Professional poker. Here's what happens, he said at normal volume. I file for medical attention immediately and demand preservation of all body cam and dash cam footage under spoliation sanctions. I'll also request an independent scan of your scalp. Meanwhile, Marina lights a small fire and watches who tries to stomp it. He closed the pad. Keep your balance. Don't give them any easy headlines. Sutter returned early, impatience playing across his jaw. Time's up, counselor. Carver rose, collected his briefcase. We'll be back with paperwork, he said, cheerful as a warning. As they exited, he brushed Malik's sleeve like static. A business card slipped into Malik's cuff. Tactile Morse. Back in the corridor, Bell leaned against a vending machine watching. He tracked Carver leave, then sized up Malik like a puzzle he wished were simpler. You boys sure piled it on today, Malik said, steady. Bell's lips twitched, a flicker of something human, or just gas. Save it for court, he muttered. They parked Malik in holding again. The card in his sleeve had 3 words under Carver's name: ambulance, chain, cameras. He committed them to memory, then let the card fall into the toilet tank's ceramic lip, retrievable, invisible. The station's noise shifted. Phones rang with a different urgency. Someone cursed in records. Nightingale's quiet audit was nibbling the grid, little brownouts, a printer looped, a router hiccup. Not obvious, just irritating, softening edges, distracting hands. Malik closed his eyes and leaned his head back against concrete, hearing the building start to forget its own tempo. The chief reappeared faster than Malik expected, flanked by a lieutenant with shoulders like a refrigerator. Whitaker's smile had narrowed to a blade. Your lawyer filed, he said, a little amused, requesting medical evaluation and preservation orders. Colorful. He held a sheet between 2 fingers as if it smelled. We're very compliant here. He let the word hang like a dare. You know, Mr. Jordan, when outside people tug on threads, local fabric phrase, and then folks start asking me why I didn't secure the weave early. He glanced at the lieutenant. Move him to interview 3. Interview 3 was colder, smaller, the camera more obvious. They sat him alone for 7 minutes, just long enough to erode patience. Then the door opened and Rourke stepped in, knuckles bandaged, pride unbandaged. He set a paper cup down, didn't offer it. You could have just said, sir, Rourke said, voice low and personal. Would have saved you a lot of blood. Malik regarded him like a museum exhibit, an artifact of small power. You swung a driver at a homeowner, he said. Say sir to that. Heat flared behind Rourke's eyes. The camera blinked. Patient. Rourke leaned close, breath sour with coffee. You think that ID turns back time? Out there, neighbor. It's me and mine making the rules. You bleed in my town when I say so. Malik kept his gaze level, counted the pulse in Rourke's neck. Dan, he said quietly, say this out loud for the tape. You crossed the property line with a weapon. For a half-second, instinct tugged at truth. Rourke swallowed it whole. He straightened, smiled a cold mile. We done. He banged the door on his way out, leaving stale bravado to perfume the room. The lieutenant returned with a paramedic. Carver's emergency motion had teeth. The medic, a woman in her 40s with tired competence, checked Malik's vitals. You need scans, she said, eyes landing on dried blood. The lieutenant frowned. He's fine. Not your call, she said, snapping a cuff around Malik's arm. Head injuries are liars. She scribbled numbers, then looked at Malik with professional neutrality that read like mercy. You ride? The lieutenant hesitated. Whitaker's voice, somewhere down the hall, said, Process him first. The medic exhaled. Document refusal, she told her partner. Bureaucracy's knives cut both ways. They wheeled Malik back. The medic's partner palmed a pamphlet to him, a hospital consent form. On the back, in pencil, a surgeon's pager number, and a word, independent. Nightingale nibbled again. An alarm panel chirped, then settled. The front desk printer disgorged blank pages like snow. A patrol sergeant cursed the Wi-Fi and slapped the modem. Small static became weather. Malik breathed, conserving strength. He thought of Kavanaugh, of the calls that would be made if he truly went missing. That leverage existed, but timing was everything. Trigger too soon, and Whitaker would burn the house. Santos's article hit local feeds like a brass knuckle wrapped in velvet. Sterling Point resident hospitalized after altercation with off-duty officer, the headline walked. Neutral enough to breathe. Iron underneath. It demanded preservation of footage, listed questions about probable cause, named a neighbor who'd heard a whistling swing. The comments ignited, then polarized, then attracted attention from a city desk 2 counties over. Phones at Northwood began jangling with the wrong tone, curious, official, nosy. Whitaker felt the temperature change. He called the city attorney with a voice like clipped hedges. Malik smiled without showing teeth. In holding, Bell slid in, shut the door, and leaned against it. Full disclosure, he muttered. I didn't like what I saw at the curb. Malik studied him. Then fix it. Bell's jaw ticked. Not how it works. It's exactly how it works, Malik said softly. All systems are people pretending they can't move. Bell stared at the floor. You're not the first man I've watched bleed on paperwork. He shoved off the door. Keep your head down. Don't mouth off to Rourke again. He left like a man who hated both paths ahead and picked neither. Carver came back with a court order for medical transport hot enough to singe fingers. A judge, one not on Whitaker's invite list, had signed it after Marina's story started to trend. Sutter scowled, reading the seal as if it were counterfeit. The medic reappeared with a stretcher, glare polished. Now it's my call, she said. The lieutenant bristled, then stood down after a terse phone call, wherein Whitaker measured optics like a jeweler. Malik climbed aboard slowly. Every movement a nail tapping a coffin Whitaker could no longer close quietly. The wheels squeaked toward the bay doors. On the ramp, the world widened. Sun, air, the taste of outside. 2 uniforms flanked the gurney. Radios muttering. The ambulance doors yawned open. Malik's eyes mapped the lot. Chain link perimeter. Camera angles. Blind spots under a flickering security light. A maintenance truck parked crooked near the generator enclosure. Nightingale's footprint. The medic tucked a blanket around him and said too evenly, You're going to be okay. Translation: Move soon. He felt the stretcher click into place, the doors slam, the muffled thrum of the engine. He waited for the first right turn, the one cameras missed. As the ambulance rolled, the medic placed a pulse ox on his finger and leaned in. Do not speak, she mouthed, then tapped the oxygen tank, unscrewing it, half a turn. The hiss covered the whisper of Velcro opening. A small foil packet slid under the sheet. Burner phone, old school and ugly. The EMT partner, eyes on the road, said, hitting Old Mill to avoid construction as code. The escort car fell behind for 3 seconds at a 4-way stop where everyone knew everyone else's habits. 3 beats can be a lifetime. Malik pressed the burner to his thigh. The medic's stethoscope brushed the mic at her collar, generating static. Now, she mouthed. Malik cupped the phone under the blanket, thumbed power, memorized the cheap keypad's stubborn click. He dialed Nightingale's direct secondary. Package moving, he breathed, using the hiss as cover. Local king has long reach. Minimal noise. Received, the gravel voice said, already far away. Street team 3 blocks out. Hospital corridor will be ours for 6 minutes. Use window. We ghost the escorts politely. The line died. The medic's eyes found his. She nodded once. Profession first, rebellion as hobby. They backed into the hospital bay. The escort officers unfolded from their car with territorial boredom. Inside, the ER was all bleach and busyness, clipped questions, and exhausted competence. The medic barked vitals. A triage nurse took over with a briskness that left no space for police commentary. Malik's stretcher pivoted down a hall to imaging. Cameras here were less cooperative. Nightingale had worried them into intermittent naps. At the CT suite, the medic palmed the burner, back from Malik with magician neatness, then said aloud, "He's concussed but oriented." Translation. Clock starts now. A radiology tech with pink sneakers and no patience shooed the uniforms to the hall. "You can't be in here," she chirped, authority wrapped in sugar. The scanner whirred. Malik lay still while his skull bloomed in cross sections. He kept breathing to a metronome only he heard. Nightingale's street team, 2 plain sedans, and a van that looked like it housed ladders, took positions outside. In the corridor, a gurney laden with linen carts stalled right where a certain camera should have had line of sight. An orderly apologized loudly while blocking. Small weather, strategic fog. The CT finished. The tech helped slide him back and winked with one eye like a secret handshake. "Doctor will review," she said. In the hall, the escort officers argued quietly about jurisdiction with a charge nurse who had seen bigger men blink. Whitaker called the ER desk twice. Both calls were placed on eternal hold. Nightingale's van tripped a harmless alarm in facilities, drawing a janitor and a supervisor away from the ER camera closet. Malik's bed rolled left instead of right, a detour framed as clerical error. The medic's hand was light on the rail. Steady. A door marked orthopedic storage clicked and revealed a very clean, very empty room that smelled like nothing. The medic guided Malik inside with practiced indifference and shut it softly. The other side of the room opened to a service corridor currently closed for sanitization, a laminated sign lying with corporate politesse. 2 figures in maintenance blues stood beside a laundry cart piled too neatly. "Eagle," one said without saying. Malik swung his legs over, the room tilting slightly. The medic pressed a gauze pack into his palm. Inside, an ID the hospital didn't issue. "Turn left then right," the taller figure said. "Elevator C to sublevel. Parking P2, van bay 12. 6 minutes quiet, then noise returns." The medic's eyes shone with something like apology. "You'll want staples," she said, professional to the end. Malik managed a half smile. "I'll send a postcard." The laundry cart rolled, shielding him as they slipped into the service corridor. Doors breathed. Fluorescents hummed. In the main hall, the escort officers realized they'd lost 50 feet of patient and started arguing with air. On P2, a van door whispered open. The city kept spinning, unaware. Nightingale's driver, mid-50s, face like an old leather jacket, helped Malik climb in. "You look like yesterday's news," he said amiably, then handed over saline wipes and a ball cap with a roofing company logo. "We'll get you stitched without paperwork." Malik settled, the van easing into a stream of anonymous vehicles. "Whitaker," the driver asked. "He's futile," Malik said, "and careful." "Careful brakes, too," the driver replied. "Just later and louder." They took a back road lined with warehouses that pretended to be distribution hubs and were, in fact, distribution hubs. The city's veins pulsed quiet. Meanwhile, back at Northwood, Santos's second hit landed. Chief Whitaker faces questions over evidence handling in Sterling Point incident. It quoted a former clerk who'd left records for personal reasons and described mysterious gaps in logging protocols. A state rep retweeted it with the diplomatic caption, Transparency builds trust. A civil rights attorney thread-counted Whitaker's past settlements like a quilt. The story now had an orbit of its own. Whitaker paced his office, phone going hot, cold, hot, ordering calm in a building bred for compliance. Calm refused him. He called Rourke. "Find me good news," he said. Nightingale's crew brought Malik to a storefront clinic with frosted glass and a potted plant too healthy to be real. Inside, a physician with veteran eyes and steady hands cleaned the scalp wound and closed it with neat, unflinching staples. "You should have been imaged hours earlier," she said. "You were." She glanced at him, assessing the lie without comment. "You'll have a headache that feels like prophecy. Don't sleep too long at a stretch." She handed over instructions and a sling he didn't need. "You pay?" "Covered," the driver said. Money moved without paper, as intended. Santos called the burner as Malik sipped something tasteless that promised electrolytes. "Carver says you're out of their immediate reach," she said, relief disguised as cool. "For the moment," Malik answered. "Whitaker won't throw a tantrum. He'll lace up boots. Then we lace faster. I've got a neighbor who heard Rourke's laugh before the sirens and a mover who swears that box cutter was theirs. They'll go on background now, on the record, after we show them daylight." "Be careful," Malik repeated. "Always," she said, then added, "they'll try to discredit you with your own resume." "Let them," Malik said. "The truth with credentials still weighs more than a lie with a badge." He ended the call and let his head rest against the cool window. Nightingale's driver checked the mirror. "We can ghost you further. Safe house. Eyes on the house. Long game." Malik shook his head carefully. "I'm not leaving my home to their story. I'll sleep in my bed tonight." The driver grunted. "Then we'll make the street remember who owns which lawn." He turned the wheel, threading the van towards Sterling Point, the sun lowering like a witness tired of perjury. Back at the precinct, Whitaker convened Sutter, Bell, and Rourke in his office that smelled faintly of cigar and disinfectant. "He slipped through because you let process get weaponized," he said, voice mild, blade sharp. "We close ranks. We hold interviews. We release the report. My report." Bell's eyebrow twitched. Rourke glared at a family photo on the chief's credenza as if it had insulted him. "What if state calls?" Sutter asked. "They won't. Not today," Whitaker said. "And if they do, we remind them how their last bond issue passed." He smiled. "Public safety is an excellent cudgel." The van idled a block from Malik's place. Nightingale's street team had already salted the perimeter with nothing more dramatic than parked cars and a pair of joggers who weren't sweating. Malik stepped out slowly, cap low, staples tugging. He looked at his porch, and felt the rage go cold enough to wield. The driver handed him a key fob. "Camera system. New eyes. Your router's awake again." Malik nodded. "Thank you." "Clock's ticking," the driver said. "Now they'll try something soft before they try something blunt." Malik set his jaw. "Then we'll answer soft with steel." He crossed the lawn they'd tried to rename with a club swing, ascended his steps, and fit the key in the lock. The house breathed him in. He stood in the foyer, listening to the hush, then exhaled a promise. "This will be mine in daylight and mine in the story." On the street, a cruiser rolled past and didn't pause. In town, phones kept ringing. Reporters, attorneys, state staffers suddenly very interested in old files. At the Northwood desk, a printer coughed up page 1 of Whitaker's final report. Outside, evening gathered its questions and waited for answers. For the first time since Rourke's driver kissed his skull, Malik felt something besides clinical resolve flicker to life. Thin, unfamiliar. Hope. He had ballast now. One ally in daylight and another in shadow. From his foyer, he caught Whitaker framed in a dark sedan across the street, mouth curled in a predator's smile. Of course the chief had let certain calls travel. He wanted to see who Malik reached for, to map every loose thread before cutting them at once. The race had shifted. It wasn't escape anymore. It was tempo, pressure, and choosing the ground. Ben Carver arrived looking like detention hall personnel. Mid-50s, paunchy, suit rumpled by long days. Perfect camouflage. They didn't talk in the living room. Too many angles. Instead, they used the garage with the door half lowered, a fan humming, the house's new cameras watching the street. Carver's posture shed its slump the second the deadbolt clicked. Old muscle remembered old tradecraft. He set a slim briefcase on a workbench beside a coil of garden hose and a box of nails, flipped it open, and powered a sound scrambler the size of a paperback. The air thickened, buzzing faintly. 10 minutes before anyone gets nosy, Carver said, voice tight and practical. Marina sent me. Talk fast. Malik, temples pounding, laid it out with surgical edges. Rourke's unprovoked swing, Bell's bagged box cutter, Sutter's cuffs, Whitaker's monarchy speech, the hospital detour, Nightingale's quiet hands. He sketched the system, not the symptoms, how policy became leverage, how paperwork became a weapon. Carver's face thinned as each piece fell. He scribbled hard, but his eyes kept panning. Neighbor sightlines, driveway angles, the unmarked sedan down the block. It's worse than rumor, he muttered. And rumor was already screaming. For years we've had whispers, Carver said, writing in slashes. Misplaced evidence, witnesses who moved away, traffic stops that bled like beatings, but nobody they couldn't grind into paste. He lifted his gaze. You're not only a victim, Mr. Jordan. You're a key. That also makes you target zero. He outlined Marina's plan. She'd started digging through Whitaker's and Rourke's money trails, benevolent funds, vendor payouts, golf course charities that smelled like detergent over blood. Old cases were being cross-referenced for patterns, names, timing. We'll map the slush and the strings, he said. Then the hands pulling them. The box cutter is our hinge, Carver added. Marina contacted the movers. Their foreman confirmed that exact brand is standard issue for crews and gets left behind more than anyone admits. It's a start, not enough. He set down the pen. Listen, he won't keep playing home and hospital. Whitaker will force process to look legitimate. Fast paper, dirty judge, clean signature. Transfer solves his problem. Vans crash. Prisoners lunge. Stories close. He glanced toward the street. Expect an afternoon knock with a smile. They'll make it an op, not an arrest. His mouth hardened. We prepare for the van. Carver palmed a small metallic dot across the bench. It looked like a cufflink you'd misplace in a suit bag. Panic button GPS bead, one burst emergency ping. Range is sufficient, low probability of intercept. It's not much, but it's what I can hand across a driveway. Malik weighed the cold speck in his palm, then slid it into his pocket like a promise. Carver's shoulders reassumed that teacherly sag. He killed the scrambler. The garage fan reclaimed the room. At the side door, he rehearsed 3 harmless lines about filings and hearings. Then he was gone. Ordinary again. Retaliation arrived sooner than Dread predicted. Marina Santos worked late at the paper, hunched among boxes, backlit by a laptop's square glow. She had found it, a benevolent fund that smelled like bleach, poured over kickbacks. Local businesses shaken down under the righteous banner of supporting the badge. The ledger wasn't elegant. It didn't need to be. It was connective tissue, payments, dinners, dropped charges, selective zeal. She started a draft naming names, footnoting receipts. She didn't hear the back door until it failed. 2 masked figures slipped in, one broad like Sutter, one coiled and jumpy like Bell. No words. Violence landed precise and impersonal. Sutter slammed her skull against a desk corner. Bell salted gasoline across files, hard drives, years. Curiosity kills careers, Sutter growled. Contempt, slow and heavy. A match flared. The fire answered like an eager dog. They left Marina face down, breathing shallow, the room roaring orange. Smoke slithered toward streetlights. A passerby saw it before the alarm system could decide whose jurisdiction it offended. Sirens carved the night. Firefighters dragged her out of ruin barely ahead of collapse, alive by inches. The ledger charred into ash and vapor, leaving heat, soot, and a story. By dawn, Whitaker had his podium smile polished. He didn't visit a cell, he visited cameras. He announced new evidence tying a certain suspect and associates to an arson that injured a member of our press community. Paper rattled. A judge nobody quoted often had signed an arrest warrant dense with fabricated phone pings and a fantasy supply chain of accelerants. At Malik's door, two uniforms brought a courteous knock and a tone rehearsed for TV. "Mr. Jordan, we need you to come with us." He looked at his porch, then at the unmarked sedan. He nodded once. They booked him fast. No drama, just signatures and that tone. "For your own safety," someone lied. The transfer order already existed, time-stamped like it could vote. It said State Supermax, said high risk, said expedited. Whitaker didn't pretend civility when he appeared at the chain-link gate, hands folded, enjoying the pageant. "Special transport," he said mildly. "We take care of our guests." Malik met his eyes and learned plenty. The man believed in thunderclaps, not audits. The cuffs bit. The ankle chain kissed steel. Malik felt the little weight of Carver's gift pressing his pocket. Last tool. Last margin. The van was a dull gray rectangle that smelled like mopped fear. No windows in back. A partition of smug plex separated prisoner from driver. Two transport officers he didn't recognize faced him. Big, bored, confident in their script. The van trundled through the sally port and took the highway's outside lane like a hearse with schedule. The talky one leaned forward, teeth bared in a grin used on deer. "Shame," he said. "CIA man, huh? Must sting. Taken down by small-town blue." Malik closed his eyes and let breathing turn shallow. Mind mapping bolts, seams, rattles, rhythm. The quiet one joined the theater. "Chief says you torch places with people inside," he said, sanctimony cheap as gas station coffee. They weren't reassuring each other. They were painting a record. The route arced towards State Forest, a long green tunnel without witnesses. Malik tracked the van's sway over patched asphalt, identified a loose panel near the roof. By the clattermorse it tapped at 60. The panic beads button waited under his thumb, a reserved future. Not yet. He needed noise and blur, and one mistake. "Not so tough now," Talkie said, elbowing his partner. "Praying, spook." Malik opened his eyes. "I don't pray," he said, voice flat as a plate. "I plan." Surprise cracked their choreography. He surged as far as chains allowed and drove his forehead into the talker's nose. Gritty crunch, bright blood, a squeal pitched between anger and injury. The second man swore and yanked for his taser. The headbutt was stage dressing. Malik chopped his cuffed wrist down onto the man's forearm, using steel like a mace. Bone faltered. The taser pinwheeled across the floor. In that breath, Malik pressed the cufflink button. Somewhere, a network turned toward him. Seconds were coins. He spent them all. He hooked his cuffed hands under the bench and heaved. Bolts screamed as the mount surrendered. The bench became a battering ram. He slammed it into the partition. Plex shattered into confetti and bad days. The driver jerked, swore, and lost the lane. Tires wrote desperate letters. Another swing, lower, meaner. The van fishtailed, kissed guardrail, and broke a promise to gravity. Air became tumble. Metal shrieked, branches scythed. Malik tucked chin, let momentum spend itself, and counted rotations by change, rattling in the driver's cup holder like hail. Silence swelled, broken by the tick-tick of cooling metal and a drip legislating its own pace. The van lay on its flank, windows vein-cracked, interior a salad of debris and groans. Malik's vision ghosted black at the edges, then crawled back. Talkie was unconscious, face a ruin. Quiet had a leg bent wrong and a mouthful of curses. Malik found a triangle of plex and teased his cuffs open, the old habit clicking like piano scales. Ankles next, release lever under the bench stump. Always cheap, always there. He skimmed a sidearm, an extra mag, the radio. He slid through the shattered windshield into green shade and damp air. Oaks watched like old jurors. Sirens already whispered their intent miles away. Van GPS tattling like a coworker. Malik moved deeper into trees, breath measured, body polling damage and tabulating costs. The radio crackled. Unit 7, non-responsive. Last ping grid. Prisoner is Malik Jordan. Armed, extremely dangerous. He smiled without joy. Let them calibrate fear properly. He keyed the mic once, kept his voice calm and clear. Tell Chief Whitaker the ghost stepped out of the machine, he said. Board changed. Your move. He killed the radio. He melted into green, the forest swallowing him like a favored rumor. The hunt kicked off poorly for them. Sweeps that swept air. Roadblocks that blocked nobody. Whitaker locked the county down and fed tactical teams a map of guesses. Nightingale's two-person crew reached Malik within the hour, slipping out of understory like the woods grew them, satellite phone, laptop, medkit, clothes that didn't know his name. They cleaned wounds, taped ribs, checked pupils, said little. Then they led him to a cabin older than the highways, hidden in state timber, built to be forgotten. From there, the war shifted fronts. Malik wasn't a breaker of code so much as a breaker of people. He aimed first at Belle, the youngest, the finder of the planted blade, because youth leaks secrets under pressure. Nightingale's scrape teams fed Malik the tender spots, debt, habit, pride. A text arrived on Belle's phone just after midnight, a satellite image of his sedan outside an illegal backroom game, time-stamped, geolocated, bookended by departmental policy he'd violated. The follow-up line was simple. Whitaker dislikes partners with hobbies. Panic is an accelerant. Bell tried to hide the gasoline he was carrying. Bell started purging his personal laptop, phoning a bookie, burning minutes and options. Everything became telemetry. Next, Malik planted a different fire under Sutter, the enforcer who'd bounced Marina's skull. Files arrived on Sutter's stoop in a nondescript envelope. Photos of his wife with a developer, and bank statements showing the developer's kickbacks washing through Whitaker's benevolent fund. Message, your boss profits while your home erodes. Pride curdled. Sutter confronted Bell in the precinct lot. The argument, caught by a long-range mic, turned operatic. Accusations, slurs, promises. Cracks spidered. The wall stopped sounding like a wall. Whitaker demanded obedience. Malik offered paranoia. Against the king himself, leverage wasn't shame. It was ego. Nightingale's ghosts ghosted into the PD's systems through stray cred leaks and printer queues. Whitaker logged in one morning to a prompt that insisted his password was now Malik was here, irritation engineered, not catastrophic, yet. His webcam blinked without permission and sent him a still image of himself staring at himself. Petty? Maybe. Precision? Definitely. A blogger received neat documentation of a steakhouse dinner charged to the city budget. Small cuts, control frayed. Kings dislike imagining eyes in their walls. Finally, Rourke, the hammer, not the hand. His drinking followed a clock nobody else respected. A bartender with a long memory and a longer grudge worked the night shift when Rourke slouched onto a stool, the room smelling like disinfectant, citrus regret. A mic under the bar caught everything. Greased by whiskey and self-pity, Rourke peacocked for an audience of one. He bragged about the porch, the swing, the silk shirt, the blood. He complained about ungrateful nobodies. Then he said too much about a fire and what message ash carries, a slip no innocent tongue could form. That reporter? Rourke slurred, eyes wet and mean. She got what was coming. Chief said it had to happen. We sent the lesson. It was the confession Malik needed, wrapped in Rourke's worst habits. Back at the cabin, Malik arranged evidence like a careful meal. Bell's panicked metadata, Sutter's parking lot opera, Marina's recovered financials, Nightingale resurrected off a fire-scarred drive, Rourke's whiskey-bright boasts. He built a single encrypted package: assault, evidence fabrication, arson, attempted murder, conspiracy orchestrated by Damon Whitaker. The architecture of the empire sketched itself, and the load-bearing beams glowed. He hovered over the enter key at 5 a.m. before birds remembered their songs. The package went everywhere that mattered all at once: FBI public corruption, DOJ civil rights, state AG, major national desks. No single inbox could bury it. No single ally could sandbag the flood. The effect was immediate, the way mornings sometimes crash in instead of dawn. Black SUVs and unmarked sedans ate highway. The governor's order put state police around Northwood's building. Nobody in, nobody out. No shredders humming. The PD woke to a perimeter and a headache not cured by coffee. Whitaker fielded his first call from a panicked councilman, his second from a reporter with sharper teeth, his third while watching federal jackets swarm his lot. He phoned a state senator he'd once dined with. The line rang into a new kind of silence. Cut loose. The office door banged. "Chief Damon Whitaker, you're under arrest." The lead agent's voice was professional boredom. Cuffs clicked. Whitaker's face, usually carved from disapproval, twitched disbelief, then fury, then something like inventory. Years of cultivated fear softened into air. Outside, cameras licked their chops. Inside, the king learned about gravity. Dan Rourke woke to fists on his door and sunlight misbehaving. He stumbled in boxers into a hallway that filled with troopers and instructions. His hangover made the room sway. The cuffs made it real. At roll call, Sutter was plucked from the line, the not guilty faces around him mixing contempt with relief. Bell didn't make it to a desk. He was found weeping in his car, already telling a federal agent everything, and then more. Newsrooms cut morning fluff to go live. Rourke's slurred confession looped, his ugliness subtitled, his laugh turned emblematic. Marina watched from a hospital room bleached to the bone, gauze mapping the shape of her stubbornness. The anchor's phrasing, alleged slush fund, pattern of abuse, gave way to facts with more teeth as documents scrolled on screen. Ben Carver stood beside her, hand resting light on her shoulder. "We got them," he said, soft as good coffee. "All of them." Outside Northwood, residents gathered, sleep in eyes, anger in hands, relief like a storm finally breaking. Stories poured, a sun framed, a shop shaken down, a traffic stop that turned into stitches. The silence Whitaker built imploded. Officer Dwyer, the kid who'd slipped Malik the lifeline, stepped before microphones, voice unsteady and brave. He put his badge in a small plastic tray, as if returning a library card. "I joined to protect and serve," he said. "Not to staff a racket." The crowd's murmur rose and steadied. In the cabin, Malik watched two screens, the news and the tree line. He wasn't interested in vengeance. He wanted the ledger balanced. He sent one last encrypted note to Nightingale. "Eagle clear, mission complete, going dark." Laptop closed. The black screen held a bruised man with steady eyes. He stepped outside into cool shade, listening to a forest that didn't care. He'd been dragged into a fight on a street where he'd wanted to mow lawns and argue about porch paint. He'd been forced to operate in the margins to repair what the center refused to. He thought of his porch, its boards waiting for sandpaper, not blood. Of neighbors who'd waved with caution and would now wave with something else. Shadows gather in bright places, he reminded himself. He walked down the path and let the trees erase his outline for a while. Weeks later, Sterling Point's name became shorthand on cable shows and kitchen tables. Trials unspooled like thread pulled from rot. Whitaker, Rourke, Sutter, Bell, a dozen more. Pleas stacked. Testimony walked rooms slow and sure. With the poison siphoned, something green pushed up. Town halls filled with arguments that built rather than bruised. A civilian oversight board took shape, messy, vocal, necessary. Policy was rewritten with community fingerprints. People who'd been afraid grew loud in their own names. Power stopped sounding like threat and started sounding like service. One memo, one training, one apology at a time. The lesson wasn't tidy. Empires aren't always capped by domes. Sometimes they're housed in staff rooms with whiteboards and quiet jokes. They're constructed from prejudice and silence and the conveniences of looking away. But they crack. Sometimes it's a headline. Sometimes it's an unflinching neighbor. Sometimes it's a ghost knocking on a king's door at 5 a.m. A single refusal to bow can start an avalanche. Fear builds fast, but truth is heavier. In Sterling Point, the heaviest thing in the room finally wasn't the badge. It was the record. And records, once opened, don't close easily. Which moment satisfied most? The cuffs on Whitaker? Rourke's swagger dissolving? Dwyer's badge in a tray? Take your pick. Healing doesn't start with parades. It starts with audits and admission. First steps for any burned town: protect evidence, protect witnesses. Build oversight with teeth and neighbors' voices, not merely consultants. Replace quiet settlements with public accounting. Train for dignity like it's a skill, because it is. Then keep telling the story so the next chief learns where this one fell. The work is unglamorous, relentless, necessary. The wall didn't fall by accident. It was pushed and kept down. He stayed crouched among ferns while sirens stitched the distance. Keying the seized radio, Malik let his voice ride the open channel, calm as a cold river. "This is Malik Jordan," he said, every unit in earshot catching the syllables. "Tell Chief Whitaker the ghost's out of the machine. Board changed. Your move." He cut transmission and slid the radio under leaves. Fear hunts poorly. Humiliation hunts worse. He moved deeper into timber. Footfalls measured, letting the forest eat his heat signature. The county locked itself down around guesses. He breathed, bled a little, and kept thinking. For 48 hours, Malik became a rumor the scanners couldn't pin. Roadblocks sprouted like weeds. Aviation assets burned fuel above tree line. Tactical stacks swept through empty valleys. They were hunting a man. He wasn't being a man. He was operating doctrine. Pattern break, misdirection, posture as silence. Nightingale's advance element found him first. 2 figures stepping from green with a sat phone, field kit, analgesics, and clothes that didn't remember names. They irrigated cuts, screened for concussion drift, and guided him along a deer path to a safe house cabin tucked inside bureaucratic blind spots. The cabin had a stove that clicked, a table that wobbled, and no history anyone could subpoena. From here, the fight shifted from asphalt to circuitry. Malik wasn't a hacker. He was an extractor. He didn't kick doors and code. He knocked on human seams. The first seam was Officer Bell, the youngest conspirator, the one who found the cutter. Nightingale had already sketched his profile. Gambling habit, side deals, shaky pride. Late, a text with a satellite photo arrived on Bell's phone, time-stamped. His car parked outside an illegal game he'd funded with seized cash. The follow-up line was gentle as a hammer. "The chief dislikes partners with secrets. Choose wisely." Bell's pulse turned into decision soup. He called a bookie, scrubbed his laptop, and created the digital smoke Malik needed. Next, Malik angled at Sutter, the desk slammer. A discreet envelope appeared on Sutter's stoop, glossy photos of his wife with a local developer, plus bank statements showing that developers' kickbacks laundering through Whitaker's benevolent fund. Translation: Your house is burning while your boss fans it. Grinning, pride curdled into poison. Sutter stormed Bell in the lot. Microphones loved them for it. While lieutenants bickered on asphalt, Malik looked up the chain. Kings don't scare, they fray. Ego was Whitaker's softest armor. Nightingale's quiet hands slipped into the department's network via misconfigured printers and a forgotten contractor account. Whitaker's desktop flashed a new demand. Password changed to Malik was here. Irritating, not fatal, perfect. His office webcam coughed him a still frame of himself looking angry at himself. A local blogger received neat receipts for a steak dinner dressed as community engagement. These weren't strikes, they were taps on the crown. Monarchs hate wondering who's watching from their own walls. Rourke, meanwhile, drank like time owed him change. The chosen knight, a bartender with a personal history, poured heavy and listened heavier. A mic nested under lacquer caught everything. Liquor loosened Dan's tongue into long, ugly spirals. How the porch confrontation taught manners. How the neighborhood should have known its pecking order. How silk shirts bleed. Then arrogance tripped him into confession about the newsroom blaze. Details nobody but an arsonist or his accomplice would know. He half whispered, half bragged. Orders come down, we deliver. Message sent. The tape didn't tremble. It just recorded, patient and lethal. Back at the cabin, Malik built a single terrible package. Bell's panic trail, Sutter's parking lot opera, Marina's resurrected financials from a smoke-scored drive, the webcam still, the steak receipt, Rourke's slurred admissions, cross-references tightened into a noose woven from timestamps, routing numbers, badge swipes, and hubris. He documented the chain: assault, planted evidence, obstruction, arson, attempted murder, conspiracy directed by Chief Damon Whitaker. Then he encrypted, checked, rechecked, and staged the blast. He didn't need a judge, he needed daylight. Daylight is meaner than warrants when it hits all the right desks at once. At 5 sharp, the horizon went from gray to operational. Malik pressed send. The bomb bloomed in inboxes that don't nap. FBI public corruption, DOJ civil rights, state attorney general, national desks accustomed to pre-dawn carnage. Redundancy defeated hush. The reaction arrived before sunrise finished tying its shoes. Federal jackets and quiet sedans slotted into formation on county roads. The governor's office told state police to put a ring around Northwood PD and treat shredders like loaded guns. Inside, coffee met air wrong as phones began performing panic in 3-part harmony. Whitaker's morning turned into a sequence of severed lifelines. A councilman called and offered only breathing noises. A reporter asked a question with the answer already taped to her notes. The senator who used to return favors didn't return calls. Through his window, black SUVs, purposeful steps, a perimeter you couldn't charm. The office door cracked like a gavel. Chief Damon Whitaker, you're under arrest. The lead agent's tone had the warmth of steel. Cuffs kissed wrists. Years of cultivated dread began evaporating from the building's paint. Whitaker looked briefly human, shocked he could be interrupted. Elsewhere, Rourke woke to fists on wood, and daylight he hadn't consented to. State troopers filled his doorway, voice-print sternness, interlocking procedure. He reached for excuses and found cotton. At roll call, Sutter's name was called, then cut short as federal hands redirected him. Bell didn't reach the threshold. Agents found him in his car, crying into a confession like it might float. Newsrooms stepped on morning fluff and ran the tape, Dan's drunken brags looping, his prejudice crystal clear even under bad audio. The country drank its coffee to the sound of a local empire cracking. In a room that smelled like antiseptic and persistence, Marina watched a muted TV. Bandages traced her scalp. Bruises argued with daylight. Carver stood beside her, palm light on her shoulder, eyes fixed on the crawl. We got them, he said. Soft, certain, all of them. Outside Northwood, residents gathered with cardboard signs and unspent grief. People who had whispered started speaking names into microphones. A mother described a son framed neat as a file. A shop owner outlined payments with dates and amounts. A kid lifted his shirt to show scar tissue from a compliance lesson. Officer Dwyer stepped forward and did the rarest thing in his building. He said the quiet part in daylight. He placed his badge in a tray like he was returning something that didn't fit. I signed up to be a guardian, he said, voice wobbling but landing. Not a gangster with paperwork. The crowd exhaled, as if it had been holding its breath for years. In the cabin, Malik watched the stream, then glanced at the woods. He keyed one last message to Nightingale. Eagle clear. Mission complete. Going dark. He closed the lid. The forest kept breathing. He didn't linger for applause. He walked the ridge path until news became wind again. He thought about the porch boards he still owed a weekend and the stubborn insistence of grass to grow around blood. You don't fix systems with sentiment. You fix them with evidence and repetition and neighbors who refuse to forget. He had operated outside to force the inside to remember its charter. Back in town, filings multiplied. Indictments wore seals. Plea deals sniffed the air. The story, Marina would later write, isn't that a ghost toppled a king. It's that the town woke up. Weeks rolled, deliberate as a grand jury. Courtrooms filled with quiet, controlled thunder. Whitaker's attorneys tried to rearrange gravity. Facts stayed heavy. Rourke's tape became an anatomy lesson in arrogance. The defense winced when jurors winced. Sutter's temper translated poorly under oath. Bell's panic found its adult voice. He named names and dates and amounts, then stared at the table like it could absolve him. More uniforms fell. Some negotiated, others flailed. Meanwhile, the council chamber hosted full rooms and clipped tempers that built instead of burned. An oversight board with subpoena teeth took shape. Policy isn't romance, but it matters. Use of force reports went public by default. Traffic stops got cameras and audits with neighbor volunteers, not just captains. Complaint intake left the station house for a neutral storefront with glass walls. Training days added blocks about dignity you could actually test. The union screamed and then met the community at 3 long tables under fluorescent lights. In those exhausting sessions, people told stories and wrote rules. Kids came to watch and stayed to argue. The badge shifted from shield to service, one log entry at a time, boring enough to last. Malik compiled his own after-action quietly, measuring scars against outcomes. Nightingale rotated the Safe House network and retired certain routes. Marina's series won awards she didn't care about. She kept meeting sources in coffee shops with chairs that squeaked. Carver returned to the unglamorous churn of filings and follow-ups, occasionally sending Malik a photo of Whitaker in chains on page A1, purely for morale. The neighbors on Sterling Point repainted porches and waved longer. Some apologized. Malik accepted without ceremony. Forgiveness is math, not magic. He balanced ledgers and chose not to let rot collect interest. One morning, he drove past the precinct he'd entered in cuffs. The new chief, interim, humble, was outside, talking with a grandmother who gestured with impressive precision. Malik didn't stop. He didn't need the theater. He had a hardware store list and a Saturday to reclaim. At home, he set the sander on the porch step he'd meant to smooth before a golf club wrote a new agenda. The machine buzzed. Wood dust lifted like a small exorcism. He pictured a life calibrated to human scale, coffee that didn't taste like stress, neighbors complaining about trash day, a sky unarmed. At precisely the hour he'd detonated the data package weeks earlier, he sat at his table and opened his laptop, not to target but to watch. Appeals began lining dockets. A state AG press conference turned into a discussion of structural fixes rather than victory laps. The governor signed a bill tightening special transfers, and mandating independent medical checks after any head strike. Marina smiled once while reading it, then went back to calling a clerk about missing dashcam indexes from 3 summers ago. The revolution's most glamorous tool remained a spreadsheet nobody would ever frame. At Northwood, a cleaning crew scrubbed a conference room where whispers used to be currency. The new oversight board met there at night, fluorescent hum steady, coffee burnt. A pastor sat beside a skater, a retired teacher beside a postal worker. A former cop who'd left on principle sat beside Dwyer, who looked 10 years older and 10 pounds lighter, like a snake after a shed. They didn't agree politely. They argued constructively. Subpoenas went out. Replies came back. People accustomed to dodging sunlight squinted, then answered. The board kept minutes and posted them, boring and brave. Whitaker watched proceedings on a wall-mounted television in a holding unit that called itself a facility with a straight face. He had time to do inventory of choices, of enablers, of the exact moment he'd mistaken power for immunity. He tried to remember a day when he could have turned a different way and couldn't. Rourke stared at a cinder block and rehearsed versions of himself that didn't drink or brag or swing. Bell wrote letters he might or might not send. Sutter learned how quiet a cell gets after lights out. Consequences teach slowly. They never stop teaching. The morning the verdicts landed, the town was quieter than it had any right to be. People watched in kitchens and break rooms and on phones outside the grocery. Jurors returned with faces that didn't waver. Guilty on conspiracy counts. Guilty on civil rights deprivations under color of law. Guilty on arson and attempted murder for the newsroom fire. Sentences followed like weather. The judge spoke about trust as a public utility. Cameras clicked. A few people cried. Most just exhaled like they'd been underwater since forever. Outside, the trees didn't celebrate. They just kept being trees. Dan Rourke's mouth opened as if to argue with physics. The court officer's hand on his elbow suggested otherwise. In a different courtroom, Whitaker learned the number of years that fit inside arrogance. Marina watched from a back row, her bandages long gone, her scars a kind of punctuation. Carver sat beside her, tie crooked on purpose, whispering procedural footnotes. "We got them," he said again, quieter this time, as if repeating a weather report. On local channels, anchors pronounced accountability like it was new. It wasn't, it was just late. Late still works. Sterling Point unlocked its shoulders one notch. Town meetings turned from fury to carpentry. Budgets, hiring slates, the dull, sacred work of maintenance. A youth advisory council formed because a teenager asked why all the adults kept messing up. A public data portal finally aligned with what lawyers promised. The department's patch changed color slightly. New thread, same shield, because symbolism matters some days. The first barbecue on Malik's street that summer smelled like forgiveness and lighter fluid. People brought food and stories and awkward jokes. No speeches, just neighbors measuring the distance between suspicion and hello. On the national shows, the story kept molting. Segment producers stitched B-roll of raids and court steps to think pieces about small-town machines. Commentators argued about reform like it was a new religion. Months later, the headlines moved on, as they always do. The town didn't. It kept its list. Audits due, trainings scheduled, lawsuits settled publicly, scholarships named for kids who never got their chance. Marina wrote follow-ups no one in New York cared about, and everyone on her block read. Ben Carver filed motions so dry they could start campfires, and they mattered. Malik planted herbs in a box on the porch rail, rosemary, mint, thyme, because a life needs sense, not just strategies. A kid from up the street biked by, braked, and asked if he could help sand. Malik handed him goggles and a caution about fingers. The boy asked if the scary men were gone. Malik said, "Enough of them." It wasn't poetry, but it was true. The ghosts he'd fought overseas had cousins here. You confront them the same way. Evidence, allies, timing, and the refusal to let fear dictate the map. The sander whined, the board smoothed. When people asked what moment felt best, Malik never picked the perp walk. He chose Dwyer's trembling statement and the oversight board's first subpoena: quiet courage, procedural teeth. He told anyone who'd listen that healing isn't a ribbon cutting. It's caseloads and calendars and a stubborn insistence on showing up. The first step, he'd say, write things down, then let neighbors read them. Transparency isn't decoration, it's plumbing. If you want clean water, you maintain the pipes. The town learned to maintain pipes. Not glamorous, absolutely glorious. Some nights the porch smelled like mint and rain. He never made himself a mascot. He attended 2 meetings, then stopped unless invited for something specific. He wasn't the story. The story was the people who stayed and did the work. When reporters called wanting a quote about heroism, he said, find the clerk who kept the index, the nurse who insisted on scans, the bartender with the tape. They'd pause, then pivot to someone else. Perfect. He liked it best when his name didn't trend. He liked it best when Saturday felt like Saturday, and the lawn demanded the humble tyranny of a mower. On an ordinary afternoon, he found the cufflink tracker in a dish by the door and turned it over in his fingers. Tool, talisman, receipt. He considered tossing it. He didn't. Not because he expected another battle, but because memory is a kind of discipline. He tucked it in a drawer with a few letters from old assignments and a photo of a team that no longer existed except in stories. Then he went outside and argued with a stubborn patch of crabgrass. Across the street, the new patrol car cruised slow, waved, and kept going. Kept. He sent Nightingale a short, encrypted note once a month like a pulse check. Eagle, quiet skies. Sometimes the reply was a thumbs up in plain text from an operator who refused to update to modern emoji. Sometimes it was silence, the good kind, not the Whitaker kind. Marina dropped by with iced coffee and a laugh that had healed unevenly but healed. Carver called to gossip about case law and then pretended he hadn't. They didn't rehash the worst night. They edited porch rail varnish choices and which barbecue spot had recovered fastest from scandal. Ordinary is its own metal. He kept the sander, the herb box, the caution. He kept the camera system and never checked it obsessively. He kept walking the block at dusk, greeting people by name. He didn't keep the fear. That belonged to other men, now housed where door locks matter more than charisma. When the first school field trip toured the new station, kids asked blunt questions and got honest answers. A wall display listed everyone who'd served since the rebuild, Dwyer's name among them in small, steady letters. The old badges weren't displayed. Some artifacts don't deserve glass. Sterling Point turned into a shorthand teachers used when they taught civics with less boredom. Remember, they'd say, institutions are people. People can fail. People can fix. The trials joined 1,000 other cautionary tales about secrecy's gravity. But the town's favorite story was smaller. A neighbor who swung back with evidence instead of fists, then refused center stage. When cable shows chased the next outrage, Sterling Point kept doing minutes, agendas, community comments. The tedious, magnificent dailiness of democracy settled in like good weather. Nobody cheered for it. They lived under it. That was enough. Some evenings, Malik sat on the steps and watched the street glow peach. He'd think of the first nod on the first day, the one Rourke mistook for a challenge. He'd think of Whitaker's cologne in the cell and the medic's steady hands in the ambulance bay, and the way a town can choose to stop lying to itself. He didn't keep a scoreboard. He kept a porch. He kept a promise to himself about how he'd live if given the chance. The herbs sweetened the air. A kid laughed somewhere off screen. The world kept turning. In the end, the lesson could fit on a note card. Power built on fear is brittle. Truth carried by many hands is heavy. Community, when awake, is louder than any siren. The hard part isn't the headline, it's the homework that follows. Malik Jordan, older now, steadier still, stood, stretched, and went to rinse sawdust from his hands. Tomorrow had errands. The town had meetings. The camera on his eaves blinked, recording nothing more dramatic than a sunset. Somewhere, a file cabinet closed with a clean click. He smiled at the ordinary and stepped back inside before the light faded. For those of us who've seen a lifetime of promises made and broken, Malik Jordan's story hits deep. It reminds us that justice can stumble, but it can also rise again through courage and truth. We've watched neighborhoods fall to fear and rebuild through faith. The lesson is clear. When good people stay silent, corruption grows. But when ordinary folks speak up, neighbors, nurses, clerks, empires of deceit finally collapse. Friends, after hearing Malik Jordan's incredible fight for justice, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed wrongdoing that tested your courage to speak out? What kept you silent, or what pushed you to act? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next powerful story of truth, redemption, and community courage.